Again. Tonight's brass beat echoes to the everyday story of a village and its band. It's the sort of beat you hear rising out of hundreds of communities in Britain. It reaches a crescendo in the northwest, where there must be more bell ends per square mile than anywhere else in brass band land. And that beat peaks out in Saddleworth and the village of Dobcross. You might remember we featured Saddleworth and its famous Whit Friday contests in our last series. Well, tonight we pick up the beat of the Dobcross band. A classic example of a village band whose fortunes swell and fade like the music they play. Dobcross's fortunes swell at the moment. They're hot, so they've decided to do a ritual fire dance. Heat of the ritual fire dance. And in 1935, Dobcross was so white hot that they became the champion of champions. They actually won the Bellevue National Contest. And they still have the cup to prove it. A giant killing act if ever there was one. By the mid-60s, though, the cup and the memories were about all this tiny Pennine village band had left. They dwindled to a handful of players and no conductor. And they'd less of a name than when they were first formed way back in 1875. You'd never have recognized Dobcross Band in those days, though, because they called themselves the 34th West Yorkshire Volunteer Rifle Band. Coming the old soldier so they could acquire a uniform and a drill shed to practice in. And that drill shed still stands. Dobcross now has its own club, but it's their bottle and not their bullets that's got them into the championship section. Over the years, the music from round here has had a decisive effect on the national brass beat. And at one period, all 12 top bands in Britain had at least one player from Saddleworth. It's a proud tradition captured in a march, the one which Dobcross Band parade through their village every year to start the Whit Friday celebrations. Hail, smiling morn. Ballingmorn, and hail to the brass roots of a movement which, despite your works bands and glamour groups, still owes its existence to the self-supporting village outfits like this one. Band and village owe a lot to each other. Henry Livings, playwright and one-time band secretary, wrote a book about it.
The band takes off, I think, from the grandeur of the village itself. There's room for everyone in it, ordinary working people and for the richest of commuters or mill managers. And wherever the band goes, it takes the pride and name of this village, and we go all over the continent.
The brass beat is now so strong in these parts that Dobcross supports 2 bands. So most nights of the week, these Pennine Hills are alive with the sound of band practice. Les Beavers is in charge of the top band.
You know, the cornet player's got all the work to do here, and then the euphonium. And the accompaniments have got all the easy work to do, and you're all over the place. You're not together. It's nothing. Into A. 1, 2. Sloppy. It's sloppy. It's not together. You must feel that. It's not together. There's about 7 different bands here. There's 1 stick, 7 different bands. 1 band, 1 stick. 1, 2.
On the agenda, Mr. Secretary, is that we've got the band's purchased 2 basses. What can we go about this valuation of tax?
Fine. A lot of work to do on that. Rhythm, can't overemphasise it.
Miniature Overture, conducted by Les Beavers, latest in a long line of musical directors at the moment. Well, they sound pretty good to me, Les. Are you satisfied yourself?
Well, at the moment, yes, things are going fairly well.
Yeah. Being a village band and self-supporting, what sort of limitations have you got?
The biggest single limitation is that of instruments, of course, because you can't really be a top-class band and a champion section band as Dobcross are without having good tattle. And the tattle we've had for the last 10, 12, 15 years is no longer good enough if we're going to sustain ourselves in the championship section. It's a very expensive business. A lot of effort is put in by the band, by individual members, and they have a lot of simple village-type functions in a year, which big bands, the Black Dykes and Brigasses, would really laugh at, I suppose, if they have a fancy dress party, once a year, and we have our own inter-band slow melody competition, and they're all designed to keep the atmosphere right and bring, 1 or 2 pounds through the doors.
Is there any danger in aiming too high?
Yes, I think that aiming high is fair enough, and I think one must aim high, but with your feet firmly on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm not given to fantasy,
Well,
With nearly 110 years of history, the Dobcross band have got through a few players, and there's competition to get a chair now. But when I asked if I could audition on the mellophonium, Les said, well, how long have you been playing it then? And I said, oh, I've only just begun. He said, well, give it a try.
We've only just begun to appreciate the worth and tradition of brass music in areas like this. People still shudder around here when they remember it's only just over 10 years ago since a local worthy lost a lot of friends. Thank God, he's reported to have said. We've got through the Saddleworth Arts Festival without fish and chips, brass bands and beer. Imagine what happened to him. It's no longer sneered at as the music of the working class. Nowadays, they write marvellous brass band music about the area where the musicians live and work. Pieces like Tameside Overture.
Nowadays, I think what the composers like and what musicians like is the sense of it going right back into the community. When people play in a brass band, they're asserting their membership of the community, and they're devoting an incredible amount of time to perfecting their work.
Banding's always been my main hobby, and I love it. That's why I do it.
And is there anything special about Dobcross from your point of view?
I think the main thing about Dobcross, I think it typifies a first-class village band. There's not very many village bands with this atmosphere who maintain the standard of music making, which Dobcross does.
Well, I think it's the type of people you get in here. For some reason, I don't know actually what the reason is. Everybody that's anybody in sort of banding always is associated with Dobcross, and apparently that's how it's always been.
I think it's a tradition. You know, they've always had a band up here, and it's always been a family atmosphere, and the bandsmen have come up and made it into the atmosphere it is now.
It's great place. Always have been. Even when I've been away from the band, you know, I always thought about the village anyway. I still live in the village. Never moved from the village.
And what's the name of Dobcross mean to people, say, in Brighouse and Rastrick?
Well, they still come over here looking for players in the band, you know, for their band. They don't make their own, so they have to paint them from bands like Dobcross, you know. And they get good ones from Dobcross.
It's a top section band. It's very, very good. They aim very high. And it's a big achievement for someone like me.
Something about Dobcross that it seems to get into your blood. There's no other band, I don't think, when you've been in Dobcross.
Jeff Hawke, you're the band secretary. What does it cost to run an operation like this?
Oh, it costs about £200 a month, I would say, to keep our band solvent. It's hard work and it's not easy to come by. We try and we do lots of concerts and functions to help raise the money, but it can be split up into, well, I would suppose £35,000 our band's value that for insurance purposes, and that covers 15,000, 20,000 for instruments, 2,500 for uniforms, and 13,000 for music. You know, it's such a vast library. And all totaled, it totaled about 35,000 we value that. It's a lot of money, and it takes a lot of raising, you know.
Now, I know that if it were possible to get a sponsor, you'd be pleased about that, wouldn't you?
Well, you know, we are interested in getting a sponsor if one can be sought, as long as we can maintain our own individuality.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, if Dobcross Band do get a sponsor, it might bring more cash into their coffers, but it could also take away their traditional independence, and that price might be dearest of all. Dearest of All, with David Morris featured on cornet. David's a former solo cornet champion of Britain, so if somebody's got to follow that, I don't see why it should be me, but it'll be different, won't it? I'll turn to the flugel this time and go for the higher class stuff. Concerto de Aranjuez. Ole. And if that's not enough to close any show, well, trust good old Wagner. We say goodnight from Dobcross with a Germanic march which still captures exactly the gutsiness, the pride and the achievement of village brass bands. Nibelungen.